Want to win money playing fantasy esports? You can do so at Alpha Draft. They have all different types of games, hundreds of contests, totally different prize entry levels, different fees to play with, numbers of people you play against. Check it out in the description box below if you in fact care about that. Now, a topic that was raised in my reflections interview I did with Skara, the former great North American player, famously of Team Dignitas, and later coach in CLG. I'll link that up there. He brought up the topic that one of the key things he felt he lacked in his career, especially towards the latter end, was a proper support network around him of people he could talk to, who would kind of like level him out, make sure the pressures of the game weren't too much on him. And I think this is kind of one of the more occluded aspects of a successful sports environment. Maybe not so much in career because they have it to a degree with the coaches and the other players, but it is quite a cutthroat environment there. But I think in terms of Western sports networks, Western sports teams and success, rather, like the good qualities of the right sort of people around you to be this support network for you and your talent and to allow you to go through hard times as well as the good times. So first and foremost, one of the issues is the climate that many of these teams exist in. I mean, particularly we're talking about League of Legends here. It's nearly always the case that star players are just better than the lesser players within the team, the ones who aren't the stars, who are in more of supportive roles. Typically, they're more skilled, they're better at the game. As a result, stars can carry or look good even in games that they actually lose, or they can be seen to have done great things and then the team loses. So people look at the lesser players, the ones who are in the roles, other roles in the team, or who aren't stars, and they see these lesser players and actually they're opened up to potentially being replaced. They're more dispensable. They're scrutinized much more harshly by their teammates, their coaches, and by the fans. And they tend to be a bit lower in the hierarchy of deciding things within the team. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. Age, status, amount of time, tenure within a team can mean lesser players or supportive players and not as good players can have a lot of say. But in general, there's a reason why people build around star players, why star players get to have a lot of say. And not only that, but star players, or the most skilled players, in general have a trend where they will be more likely to criticize these lesser players or role players. A lot of stars who are extremely skilled, but it comes naturally, or they've worked at it with a kind of like a almost incredibly driven, cutthroat kind of mentality to getting better themselves, because that's how they treated themselves and whipped themselves into incredible shape. Unfortunately, they often have a lot of difficulty having empathy or even sympathy with their teammates. And they look at their teammates and they see these lesser players and they think, this guy should be better. You know, I shouldn't have to help this guy. I shouldn't have to give up part of my game to help him. I'm doing my job. I'm trying to be the best I can be. He's holding me back. He should just do his job. I'll do my job and we'll win the game. So obviously all my blame's going to go on him and it can't be anything I'm doing. Likewise, these lesser players and role players, as a result, they're constantly stressed out. They carry the burden that if they lose the game, it might be their fault because this star might be a very good player. Now, he might not be playing the right style, but he can still look good in the game. They even have the guilt that they might have let down a fantastically skilled star player who they know maybe would be able to win if he was in some better team, or he might even stress that upon them. And then as a result, you see these lesser players at times. Sometimes this weighs on them and they'll try and do too much. Like they'll try and make up for some small flaw they have, and they'll overreach. They'll reach a little too much to try and succeed, and they'll try and make plays where they shouldn't, and they won't trust the team system, and they'll just be trying so hard. They'll be clinging on so hard that it'll all just be going through their fingers. And sometimes it goes the other way, which is just as bad as its own way, which is sometimes they do too little because they're afraid of making a mistake by making a play. They don't want to be the one who makes the play, which then loses the game, which can then be criticized. They want to just hide in the background like that kid at the back of the class who doesn't want to attract any attention so the teacher doesn't call upon him. And as a result, they don't have any impact on the game. They don't help anyone win the game. So they'd rather not be the guy who made the call or the play that loses the game, but also might have won the game. You might have needed to be proactive at times. They play to lose rather than playing to win. The reason why the support network is key is because having a good support network, whether that's coaches, other teammates, people on other teams, family members, friends who understand, first of all, it allows players to get perspective on their careers from outside the team or outside their own role or their own place. Because if they're only looking out from their own eyes, all that stress and weight is going to be on them, and they won't be able to see that this player over here, teammate maybe understands them, or the coach realizes they're trying hard and they only need them to do this small thing and they're not failing them, or an outsider say, listen, it's only the first few weeks, like give it time still, the other teams are all settling in. This kind of scenario is going to help them. They need people who recognize that they are actually good, that they have talent, or that they're giving good effort, even if they're not necessarily succeeding. That's something a coach can do. He can say, I can see the effort you're putting in here. I can see what you're trying to do well. I can see these good things you are doing in the game, even if over here you're making mistakes, it's not quite working. Even just to give them some sort of a reward in that particular sense. Ideally, some of these support network people would be within the team as well. So in a perfect world, we'd have stars who empathize with these types of players, who expect less from the less skilled players, and thus don't berate them and destroy their confidence, who maybe even will work with that player to improve, perhaps even use some of their talent to help cover a minor weakness of that guy, just as lesser players some use their strengths to facilitate the strengths of the star, and in doing so maybe gives this guy more confidence, it puts him in a more comfortable place so that guy will play better, and maybe the star's entire package isn't needed to win this particular game. Likewise, you get in a scenario where the star ideally could encourage lesser players like this so that they know that they can do something. Let them know that, listen, I'm the star player. I'm going to be taking the major load here. I'm going to be taking the lead. I'm going to be doing all these things. I don't need you to do all these things to make all these crazy plays. Just do these small things for me. That'll help me feel comfortable. That'll help back my game up. That'll facilitate my game. I'll carry you if you put me in a position where I can carry you. You facilitate me carrying you. So all this guy needs to know from the star is, what does this guy have to do to contribute, to have a meaningful impact on the game? He's not necessarily going to win the game. What does he have to do just to contribute? And then he himself has to be able to look at what can he do and then encourage him little by little on those details. Now, great examples of this scenario. We'll give you the two ends of the spectrum. First of all, let's look at CLG. So in CLG, the obvious player I'm going to pick is Doublelift, because this is a star player, always been a star player his whole career, but he's always had trust issues his whole career ever since the old players left or got bad at the game. Now, you look at Link and all the top laners he'd had pretty much, they've always been guys who had some sorts of issues. Either they'd give up carrying roles to him, they'd play in a scared way, they'd do the very limited thing he told them they could do and they wouldn't do any more. He'd lose trust in them, he'd berate them, he'd break their confidence down. As a result, these players who already had these flaws, they're exacerbated, they're amplified, they're emphasized. They were choking in all the playoff games. They weren't making plays, or they were making plays that cost you the whole game, Smithy style. They were the players where Doublelift wasn't the star almost ever who made his teammates better. That's one of the qualities they always like to say in the NBA, that your star makes your teammates better. He wasn't the guy who ever did that. His teammates, as a result, played worse even than they would have done. They were already flawed players, even though some of them were good in some senses. And as a result of them being flawed, their confidence broken down, and everything being at rock bottom for them, they couldn't facilitate Doublelift to carry. So with his fantastic talent, he was limited to just what he could individually do, almost 1v9ing in games, because he wouldn't allow his teammates to facilitate him, because he couldn't trust them and he berated them in this particular way. Now, we understand why he berates them in a way, because from his point of view, without his support network, he sees guys who are just going to miss the shot if you throw them a ball, to use the basketball analogy. But then you go over and you look at Cloud9. Now, the way High was the shot caller in this team was fantastic from this point of view. This is an empathetic player who looks around the team at what people need in the team. What does this guy need to be comfortable? Do I have to give up some farm to him? Do I have to say to him, you don't have to gank for me early, just gank top lane, I'll just survive mid lane? Does he have to roam all the time to go and place a ward for the bot lane so they're not going to get ganked, so they can feel comfortable playing against the hard lane? Does he have to go down to the bot lane to try and help them 3v2 because it's going to be a hard lane? Whatever it is, he's willing to give up his CS, his lane. And yes, it didn't work at the top international level, but it worked phenomenally domestically. That's why they had all this success and made all these LCS finals and won a bunch. What a fantastic guy at understanding and being empathetic for teammates and knowing what they need. And also having that mentality where the reason why they could do all these sick comebacks and constantly be able to get back into games and come from amazing deficits and overcome small lane disadvantages is because he's a guy who balances people out. He talks to them, he tells them, he assures them, because he's got the brain and he's going to come up with the plan. You don't have to stress because it doesn't matter if we're behind. I'll figure out a way we can get back in this game. We all keep doing our part. He'll lead us to where we need to go. He'll find the opportunity that we're going to get later in the game. And he lets people play to their strengths. He let people like Meteos be selfish in a certain way by him being unselfish and creating the space for him to do so. He didn't force their weaknesses. He doesn't force Meteos to just gank over and over in the mid lane or to be super gank heavy in the first split they played together where he wanted to do the farming style instead. Understanding all this, being a key example of a support network from inside the team, we can see how this helped his teammates and why they were able to shift star players throughout the seasons. They were able to constantly find a way back to success again, and they had this incredible run for a lineup where when you look at it at the end of history, Not too many of those names are going to be in the all-time best Western players ever list that you'd put together, but their accomplishments are fantastic within the West and even pretty decent internationally. And this is part of the reason, because they had one of the best support networks, in contrast to Doublelift and that CLG support network that was non-existent from the players, seemingly during his era. And so I think that there is something very much to be said about this. Obviously, you need all the other parts. You need skilled players, you need the right teammates, you need the right coach, you need the right environment. But then beyond that, having a great support network, you can see how that like emphasizes the best qualities and minimizes the weaknesses of a team, where not having it does the opposite effect. So I think it's an interesting concept that Skara brought up, and I can certainly see how it would have affected his career. And I think more players should probably think about this, because you can add all the other elements, but that's something you can start working on immediately, no matter what level of team you're in there.
Hey, this is Travis Gafford, the Doublelift expert, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.